World leaders have begun to gather in New York for the 78th United Nations General Assembly, but some key players are expected to skip that gathering, specifically 4 out of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council: China, the UK, France and Russia. While Chinese President Xi Jinping's absence is not unusual, what is raising questions is his Foreign Minister Wang Yi also foregoing attendance. Instead, Beijing will be represented by Vice President Han Zheng. Russia is sending its Foreign Minister, Sergey Lavrov. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and French President Emmanuel Macron have cited domestic priorities and scheduling conflicts for their absence. Their absence means US President Joe Biden could be the only heavyweight present for the event. The 2-day summit aims to generate action and commitment to more than a dozen issues that the world body is hoping to achieve by 2030. Among them, poverty and hunger, gender equality, high food prices, universal health care, post-pandemic recovery and the climate crisis. Now, activists are also taking advantage of the meeting to press their point. Tens of thousands marched in New York over the weekend to mark the start of Climate Week. They're demanding stronger action from world leaders to phase out fossil fuels. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres himself is calling for a surge in commitments to meet the 2030 goals. Now, he says countries must come around to what he calls a rescue plan for people and planet. Will Denslow has more from New York.
8 significant flooding events seen around the world in just 11 days. Experts continue to warn about the climate crisis, but calls for action are being drowned out by political inertia. The United Nations is urging the international community to turn the tide.
The climate crisis is worsening dramatic, but the collective response is lacking in ambition, credibility and urgency.
In 2015, the international community set themselves 17 targets to hit by 2030. The aim is to cut poverty, tackle inequality, address climate change and create a more prosperous world. The UN is hosting a 2-day summit at this year's General Assembly to mark the halfway point for the Sustainable Development Goals. But the UN warns that just 12% of those goals are on track.
Progress has been set back significantly in recent years. This is in part due to the lingering drag of the COVID-19 pandemic, the highest level of armed conflict globally since 1945, and climate-related disasters, as well as inflation and the rising cost of living.
Those topics will feature prominently when world leaders descend on New York for the UNGA. Roughly 100 heads of state and nearly 50 heads of government are expected to address members of the international community at the UNGA this year. Russia's president won't be here, but Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to attend. UN Security Council members will convene to discuss the war in Ukraine. Analysts see the UNGA as an opportunity to resurrect the Black Sea Grain Initiative that collapsed in July. For roughly a year, that deal helped facilitate the export of nearly 33 million tons of grain from Ukrainian ports.
The fact that all of these leaders are going to be around talking to each other, so that Putin's going to hear, here's why his decision to back out of this is posing real harms in the developing world. This can only be thought of as a good thing.
Delegates will hold meetings on a range of other issues, including pandemic preparedness and financing for development.
There's one to reboost climate change and sort of revisit the Paris Agreement to reinforce that as well. And one other small sort of footnote is also going to be discussions for the Summit of the Future, which is going to be held next year.
The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres wants to see urgent action at this General Assembly. He's calling on leaders to find compromises to achieve practical solutions for the world's most pressing problems. William Denslow, CNA, New York.